You don't think you're funny.
I don't think I'm funny.
Okay, so that's different. Do you think you have a sense of humor?
Depends.
Okay, yes, ask me.
Yeah.
Go ahead, ask me. I want to hear it.
Matthew Temple, do you have a sense of humor?
Absolutely, I have a sense of humor. I have a great sense of humor.
Matthew Temple, you're funny.
I have my moments. But everybody thinks they have a sense of humor, which I guess is different.
Everyone has a sense of humor. Not everyone thinks. Everyone has a sense of humor.
No, that I disagree with. I mean, I don't want to go to like an extreme example here, but did Hitler have a sense of humor? Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Interracial Couple Podcast.
So it's not all black and white. My name is Sarah.
And I am Matthew. Which is a very fitting beginning to today's conversation on humor in a relationship.
I think we have to tell people why we laughed.
Well,
otherwise it's going to sound really awkward.
It's not even that funny. But we've been expecting this camera our second camera to simply turn off in the middle of our conversation because it started doing that recently, and we've just sat down, got everything ready. It seemed like it was going, and then it just shut off randomly. So, and it made a nice little beep to tell us, ha, 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 you're not getting a second camera today. Yeah, so humor in a relationship, humor as a part of a healthy relationship, is it important to find each other's jokes funny?
I think it's so important to find other people, to find your partner's joke funny.
Well, what if your partner's just not funny? Leave them? Sorry, I don't find your jokes funny. I am leaving.
No, this is the thing. Is everyone's funny in their own way.
There is no truth to that statement at all.
No,
everybody believes that they have a sense of humor. That is totally true. Everyone's like, I totally have a sense of humor. But that's true for very, very few percentages of people.
I don't think I'm funny to some people, but clearly I'm funny to
You're funny to you.
I'm funny to me.
You're funny to me. Well,
I definitely can entertain myself. And am I funny to you?
I think you're a very funny person.
But I don't think a lot of people think.
No, I think a lot of people think you're funny.
No, I am not. I'm not funny at all to other people.
So, well, I guess being funny and having a sense of humor are two different things.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people don't think they're funny. I never thought I was particularly funny. You don't think you're funny.
I don't think I'm funny.
Okay, so that's different. Do you think you have a sense of humor?
Depends.
No, come on. Do you have a sense of humor, Sarah?
I do.
Okay, yes, ask me.
Yeah.
Go ahead, ask me. I want to hear it.
Matthew Temple, do you have a sense of humor?
Absolutely, I have a sense of humor. I have a great sense of humor.
Matthew Temple, you're funny.
I have my moments. But everybody thinks they have a sense of humor, which I guess is different.
Everyone has a sense of humor. Not everyone thinks. Everyone has a sense of humor.
No, that I disagree with. I mean, I don't want to go to like an extreme example here, but did Hitler have a sense of humor?
He definitely did.
He thought he did. I don't think he had a sense of humor at all. That was no humor. How about Moi? How about the ex-dictator of Kenya?
I am sure he thinks he did.
Yeah, right. And then if you didn't like what you said, he might feed you to the lions.
That's the thing, though. Is
I guess that's kind of funny.
This is the thing. Is
not for the person who's lion food, but
the jokes that I make. Some people, my mother doesn't not think I am funny at all.
No, she does. She just doesn't think some of your jokes are appropriate, which is a totally different thing.
I made some jokes in front of my mom. She just was like, no, I did not raise you to be. That is not how I raised you.
Yeah, but that's.
But you find those jokes funny.
I do. I do find those jokes funny.
And I don't make those jokes publicly because I know that not a lot of people will find, some people may take it as offensive.
Yeah, well, that's fair enough. But I think so I guess there's a bit of a difference between a sense of humor and being funny, but having a similar sense. So maybe that's actually the better question. Is having a similar sense of humor important in a relationship?
I think it's so important because that is the key, having the same sense of humor. Because if your partner, I make death jokes that most people don't find, a lot of people don't find.
Well, they're a little morbid. They're a little macabre. Your death jokes are morbid. Because by definition, it has to be morbid if it's a death joke.
And like, I don't make those jokes those jokes don't land well with anyone.
No, not with, you mean with everyone.
With everyone. So yeah.
They land with me most of the time. Sometimes they're like, that one didn't land, but that's okay.
Yeah. And even when I make them myself, I'm like, ooh, Sarah, like, don't think like that.
You've made some pretty bad jokes. You've made jokes that I definitely will never repeat. I don't want anyone to know you made some pretty bad jokes.
Yeah. So sometimes when I make
And sometimes they're funny, and that makes everyone feel even more uncomfortable because you're like, I don't want to be laughing at what you just said.
And that's the thing, is like, if I was making those jokes all the time and you found them like offensive and you're my partner, that means like, I'm okay. Like, first of all, like, I just want to say, like, I'm really okay not making offensive jokes. Like, if a joke is going to offend someone else, like, I don't need to make it, and that's my rule. If a word is going to be offensive to someone else, I don't need to use that word. There's so many words I can use. There's so many other jokes I can make. So I don't do that. But if I had to censor myself with you, is like, that would.
Yeah, I think that's actually really important. I think that's really key. It's something that I recognize was so important when we got together. Is I made a joke, and it really wasn't a terribly it was maybe an off-color joke, and you laughed, and we both kind of acknowledged that that's not a good joke. But there was no shaming around it. And I think that particularly in like this time right now where we're finding this balance between like cancel culture and then also respecting other people's viewpoints. And that's a challenging place to be sometimes, right? It's like sometimes an off-color joke has a place. It's like, it's got to be okay. We also have to find out where the limits are. What joke is a little too far? Some jokes are too far for some people, not for others, even within a particular community or whatever, right? So being able to be like, I got to test my boundaries. And it's one thing when we got together, I remember making a joke and you're like, that one was too far. But it was too far, but you did not hold that against me. I was like, oh, thank you for telling me that was too far. And now I get to kind of like say, all right. But if I don't test that out with you, then who do I test it out with? Nobody. Right?
Yeah. And that is so important. And that's why it's like, even with like in relationship, like I think that needs to be is like, you gotta be able to make the jokes that you think are funny with your partner. And then you can talk about it. And that's why I also, I'm extending the same rule to my friends. If a friend says something that I don't like, I can tell them that I didn't like it. Or if I say something that they didn't like they can come back to me and say, Sarah, like maybe that joke you made, like wasn't like, I didn't find that funny because my experience of death is not similar to yours.
But you also made a domestic violence joke once when we walked, with someone that was close to you. And she was just like, very much like, that was too much. And it was like this moment of just kind of like, could have been really awkward, but it was like your family member who you also feel so comfortable with that you're like, oh, okay, I got to check that. That was definitely not appropriate, but you were in a container where you're like, oh, and I feel like one reason why people can get really kind of tense with other people around humor is that you could have been like wanting to defend that. And someone could have been she could have been wanting to like prove a point with it. And instead it was like, oh, you know what? There's no shame for making a mistake. And that becomes okay. And I think that in a relationship is vital. Now, the other part of that you can maybe speak to is when like I make a joke that's too far or you make a joke that's too far. How do we say if you're like, no, I think that's fine. And I'm like, no, that makes me really uncomfortable. Where do we begin to find that balance? Or is that what you're talking about? Why it's so important to share a similar sense of humor?
I think the balance comes also with the person who is making the joke being okay not to make the jokes. Some people really feel entitled to their jokes and their sense of humor. And I just don't feel like that. Like my thing is like, if I make a joke and someone says it's that you crossed the line, my response is like, no, I didn't cross the line. It's like, I'm sorry, I crossed the line. Like, I want to hear from their perspective, why I crossed the line. And I don't need to make that joke. And that's like, I think that's the line. It's like some people are like, you can't censor me, but it's like, it's not censoring. Like if it's offensive, don't say it. It's
Right.
like,
and it's censoring within also within a community. Like I'm going to be sensitive to things that other people won't be sensitive to. And I think around humor too is that good humor actually exposes some part of our blind spots,
Yeah, and it's because the jokes that I've made that have closed the line, it's like actually something that I need to be educated on.
Right.
And I need to learn more of that, So it's really good when someone says like, you crossed the line, and then you take a step back and say, I'm really sorry. Like if the response is like, I'm really sorry, not defending why you crossed the line, is like, now they can be able to tell you, like you open that space where it's like, why did I cross the line?
Yeah.
If the first thing is apologizing.
Right. Yeah. And I love that. I just feel like that's really important. And I love that with our humor and just a freedom around that. But there's another kind of shadow side to that in some ways. Yeah. I had a good friend back in Vermont who was in a very long-term relationship. I don't think they were married, with someone who was really, really funny. Mm-hmm. But the humor actually became a wall. I can always hide behind humor because I'm funny. I can throw out one-liners. I can kind of like always keep, the mood is always good as long as we don't go past this thing, or if things get uncomfortable, I can make you laugh, and therefore we don't get to go into the depth of it. And I think that I've seen that in more times than one in a relationship. A funny guy, right? And everybody laughs, but it's like, oh, is that also a way of keeping your partner at a distance, keeping people at a distance?
It's interesting you say that, because I've seen it too, where it's like people who are like, don't want to talk about a certain thing, making fun of, like making jokes about it, when it's like really detrimental to their own like health. And like,
do you have an example?
I think it's like, I don't have an example, but I've seen it with like friends and family and like colleagues, where it's like someone will make a joke and you're like,
yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen it like when I was younger, particularly around homosexuality, right? Like someone who's like as soon as something gets uncomfortable around it, might make a joke or kind of tell, like an offensive homosexual joke or a offensive sexist joke or something, because like there's something within dealing with homophobia or my own sexuality or my own relationship with gender or whatever, that it's too uncomfortable to go there. So I'm gonna make a joke about it.
And I think to go back to your like questions about like a funny guy and a funny woman, like we've all seen like, or a funny woman and a funny guy in like the couples dynamic. Like we all know those couples, where it's like when you're around them, you're always laughing, but you actually don't know them apart from the jokes. Like
right.
There's something about that. Like it's like they're so funny and it's fun to hang out with them. But at the core, like you haven't met them like soul to soul, because everything is funny and everything is a joke.
Right.
And so you don't get to like really know like what, like who are they? When that curtains come out where it's like not funny, like who are these people?
Right.